welcome council officers and members of the public to the meeting. Reminder, please switch off mobile phones or to silent. I think. If there are any members of the public who are present attending virtually, please switch off your mobile phones, cameras. Meeting has been recorded and available in due course on the council's YouTube channel. To show those attending virtually and in person, can you please can hear the proceedings? Please ensure you project your voice, speak clearly. It's a full meeting, and please do not refer to others by first names. No fire alarms. I believe, is that correct?
Okay.
None
planned.
So hearing the alarm, walk slowly to the exit. Always, these two or three over here.
Well, out the main exit, like the fire exit, and then into the top end, just following myself now.
Lovely, thank you.
You can keep up, quite athletic.
We'll do the introduction as we go through. Is that it's all right? Apologies for absence.
We've got apologies from councillors Orange and councillor Stevenson, Chair.
Oh, two, I've got that too, thank you. To approve and record the minutes of the meeting held 11th of March 2024, pages 7 to 16. Can I have a mover? Oh, yeah, also mover. Thank you.
Sorry, that unanimous, Chair.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. It's so long since we all met. Is that all agreement? Thank you. Item brought forward, opinion of the chair to be considered by the meeting a matter of urgency. I think two items, not to say urgent, but one item is, I think, our internal auditor is leading us shortly, Mr. Middlemass. And I think you will be introduced to your replacement a bit later on. On behalf of the Governance Committee and Ian Room, who was your previous chair, please. Thank you for your services. I think you've been with us since the start of the partnership, I believe.
Yeah, about 3.5 years.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure for staff are pleased you're going, or well, I think there's two ways of looking at it, really, isn't there? If you're a good auditor. But thank you for your services, and we look forward to listening to your report later on. And the second one was item number. Yeah, I'm just doing the not covering it. Time to do it now, I think, isn't it? Yes, we're unable to cover the what items are John remind me. Item 6, which was the pay review. 2 reasons. Well, one mainly is since the report was produced, we've known been announced an election into Purdo, and Ian Room, who was going to present that, not here tonight. Just note that, and we'll present it again in September meeting, September 25th. After my birthday, this is it 25th? No. Full council 25th, isn't it? September meeting anyway.
Third week in September.
Yes, thank you.
Your September governance meeting.
Yeah, thank you. So declarations of interest.
Receive one, Chair.
Thank you. I agree with agenda items part A and part B, deductible part B items. Can I have a thank you, Helen. Thank you. Don't need to a whole lot now. So 6 we are passing. That's quick. Right on to item 7. For the month. Internal audit report.
Yeah, and so I'll just
That's the boss presenting.
Indeed.
Right there.
I shall start and then I shall go again, if that's okay. Smoothly, hopefully. Firstly, as noted, we've got Brad Hutton in the room, and if I may introduce Brad, he is one of our other senior assurance managers, and with Paul retiring, as you noted, he will be picking up the day-to-day oversight of the audit delivery for Devon. Brad will also be supported, if you like, by as needed by my deputy, Joe McCormick, who will hopefully appear at the next meeting with Brad, so you can see her face as well. The aim of that is that actually, I'm here today because we've got the end of year report, and it's one of those good points actually that summarises all of the work. I'm going to pause there before I steal some of Paul's thunder, but I've done that before elsewhere. But in essence, one of those key points, the other one being when the audit planning work is coming through. And the aim for myself with the partnership is that Joe's got a much more involved day-to-day aspect of the plans, the delivery, and so on, so that we can be much more flexible and responsive, get the right people in the right place. And so she'll be linking quite closely with Brad. And then when we come to the end of the year to that piece, okay, this is where we are, then you'll see me pop up again, hopefully if I'm still here next year. From that perspective to summarise and help with that end of year opinion. So Brad Hutton, Senior Insurance Manager, been with us about a year and a half now, Brad, is that right?
Yes,
If I make this, it's right for Brad just to introduce
yes,
yourself.
please do. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Brad Hudson, Senior Insurance Manager at Devon Audit Partnership. We've been blessed that we knew Paul was going to be retiring a little while ago, so it's given us ample chance to have plenty of handover meetings, and Paul's done a great job in planning out the year for us. So big shoes to fill, but I'm looking forward to working with you.
And from the end of the year report, the introduction from myself, for those that were here last year, you might remember some of this being similar. It's not always an easy role to undertake audit on either side of that particular aspect. Some people, it makes them feel quite nervous, even though they don't need to be. And actually, sometimes we have to kind of ask some awkward questions every now and then. To get to where we get to each year, to be able to sit in front of you and give you an annual opinion is a really good thing, because it means that collectively everybody's worked together to undertake that work and complete that work. I was fortunate enough myself to Paul wrote me in to do the climate change audit. So any questions on that, still go to Paul. But it really is an important thing at this point of the year to say actually that with the work that we've done within the year and potentially follow-ups and other bits as well, and other information, support, advice and anything from last year, is giving the committee and the council that assurance or not, depending on what Paul said in a minute, on how things are operating. And nothing is ever going to be perfect anywhere, because it can't be. And local government tries its hardest in many different ways, but it's not always easy, is it? And the challenges and the diversity of services is always complex. But I think in this case, thank you to the officers, not just in the room, but across the council for supporting Paul and the team. Thank you to members for taking the time as Paul comes in each meeting to update on things. And hopefully thank you for the comments and feedback and possibly questions that you might give Paul in the middle and summarise the report.
Thank you.
And so, just to introduce again, our annual report. So, and just before I do that, yes, a big thanks to officers and members for supporting me in the last 3.5 years. It's been very enjoyable and good to work with the council. So you have in front of you our annual report. It's obviously underpins your annual government statement, so it needs to be read on that basis. If we go to page 41, so that's sort of the fairly central page, sets out that we're providing reasonable assurance opinion to you this year. There are four, as you can see, there's four assurance opinions we can provide. So that's reasonable assurances, one down from substantial. The page also gives a summary on things like internal control framework, and then risk management, governance and performance management. So sort of that obviously highlights, I think, the strengths in place in terms of risk management. For instance, a lot more focus on a smaller number of risks. That's a big improvement that's occurred in the last year or so. Governance ranges have improved. You've got a more settled governance team in place now. And now you've got sort of performance reporting to strategy and resources and that sort of project delivery, support program management team and so on. So a lot of improvements we've identified. Page 42, the next page, gives a bit of a sort of summary, a visual summary of the audit we did and the areas that we did with them. And so as you can see, pretty much all sort of lots of green in all different areas. So that's again really good to see. Page 43 goes in a bit more detail about so there's 8 substantial, 16 reasonable, and only 1 unlimited, which I reported on last time, the building control partnership with Devon. So last year we provided 4 limited assurance opinions, so that's obviously improvement from last time. And we also, text also refers to various audits where we've done follow-ups. For instance, on cybersecurity and information governance, and where we've done those work, we've seen there's been improvements and reported that. That said, we also know a couple of areas where we were asked to defer work, partly largely because staff weren't in place, so that's given a little bit. And our audit on food safety. So I suppose that is an area of concern, but as you're aware, that is one of your risks on the corporate risk registers, is about recruitment and retention and so on, and getting those skills into place. In context, so we've given you reasonable, we've given you a reasonable last year. That matches pretty much what we provided to all of our other district partners. The only exception, and so is East Devon. So East Devon is not one of our partners, but looking at their last report, they are currently on 6 limited opinions out of 9. So I think they are steering towards a limited. So in context, yes, you're pretty much with most of the other districts in terms of being pretty green. I think I compare it to the county council.
Which I was going to ask you to keep that one.
The districts seem to be doing quite well. And then just going back to the document then, so on page 45, 46, I don't know what happened there with the blank page, so apologies for that, the formatting problem. But from page 47 is a summary of all the audits that we've delivered since our last meeting in March. And as you can see, there's there's I think 5 substantial assurance opinions and 5 reasonable assurance opinions. I again just like to highlight the 2 audits on let's see what page. On page 53, related to cybersecurity and information governance, where we come in and done follow-ups on those 2 audits and note, the improvements. For instance, you now have a cybersecurity group and an information governance group to take forward and manage the governance, and also we've seen introduction of IT tools and processes and so on in Phase 5. Best not to go into too much detail on that. And then on page 55, so that's Appendix 2, provides detail on our assurance map. So in essence, it seeks to highlight any cross-cutting themes across the council areas. And as you can see, we perhaps identified a couple of areas where we think you could focus on. So one area relating to performance and financial monitoring and central reporting, and the other areas about your strategies, plans and benchmarking. So I speak to head of governance earlier and talking to them where if you could have clarity on your top half a dozen key strategies that the council has got. And then pages 56, 57 is sort of pictorial representation of the assurance map. When I started doing this 3.5 years ago, that was much sort of red and amber colours and so on. Whereas these days currently there is a lot more sort of green in there, so that just highlights the improvements that we've found. And we've enjoyed working with council officers to sort of highlight areas of weakness that they've taken forward and addressed. So they have made a lot of effort to do that. And then Appendix 3 talked about our professional standards and also customer service. So I just highlight that the global internal audit standards have just been updated. And therefore the public sector internal audit standards also need to be reviewed by SIPFA and updated. So that you'll be seeing results of that next year. And we'll need to do work that as general partnership will need to do work to become compliant with that. And then secondly, we are also working on a new customer service excellence assessment. So we sign up to this customer service excellence marking, and we've actually highlighted head of government that might be something that council wants to look at as a way of demonstrating that it's putting customer service, first. So that's quite a canter through of my report. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Well, I thought it's a very positive report, but see what my colleagues have to say. Any questions? Howard Booth, I know your name.
I'm sorry, this is a bit of minutiae, I'm afraid. It's page 51, there are 2 small projects signed off by the Sustainability and Climate Change Officer. Can you tell me what those were?
What part of the page is that?
I didn't make a note of exactly where it appeared. Page 51.
Today, only 2 small projects have been approved by the Sustainability and Climate Officer.
Penultimate paragraph.
Yes, last line. Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't recall, so if I could come back to you on
Yes,
that.
it is minutiae, but I was just interested.
Yeah, probably could do that by in the meeting, so I'll just look in the audit report, but I'll know that.
Any other?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, this is
No,
a
please do.
very ignorant question, but could you just
Nothing's.
Explain. Overpayment arrears is a phrase I don't really understand. Would you mind just explaining it to me, please?
Well, that's where, I think probably where the council has, paid out.
Come in, Chair. Yeah, so obviously on housing benefits, obviously we pay out based on assessed claims. There are occasions where we may have overpaid housing benefit due to either information that's been provided or information that may obviously then come to light after the claim's been settled. If we have overpaid somebody on housing benefit, we then obviously recover that back through the housing benefit claimant. That's either recovered back through ongoing housing benefit that we're paying them, so they may repay some of that over a period of time, or if they've come off housing benefit and gone into employment, we may then obviously recover it through raising of an invoice. So any housing benefit we have overpaid, we then make sure we recover that back from the claimants.
It seems a very large figure, doesn't it?
The
798,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Is that right?
yeah, level of overpayment arrears is at 798. Obviously, that's the level of arrears over quite a significant amount of time. And just to put into context, we're paying out probably around 26 million pounds worth of housing benefit per year. So if you add that up over quite a significant number of years, 798,000, even though it's a large amount, is obviously a number of small amounts per claimant. Obviously, that is obviously cumulative, and we then obviously look to recover that back through their ongoing housing benefit or raising invoices. So it's a cumulative amount, but that level of debt would have been debt that's been built up over quite a significant amount of time, and they're obviously repaying it over an amount of time moving forward, so it's not coming back to us straight away.
It's also worth saying it's 6 years worth, isn't it? Because obviously we carry it for 6 years. So obviously we try,
6 years.
yeah, we try and recover over 6 years. So that 798,000 at any one time is 6 years worth of overpayments. So it's not just like for 1 year, it is 6 years worth. So it equates to probably about 120,000 a year, something like that. That'd be about right.
That
over
does,
about 25
does
million.
make a significant difference in understanding figures, doesn't it? Thank you very much, thank you.
And could you clarify then, is it council agency, who are large, or is it just written off?
Once we get over 6 years, obviously the recovery of that, if the age of debt's over 6 years, then obviously the recovery of that then becomes harder and then written off. But over that period of 6 years, it's
We do use agency.
we do use agencies to try and recover it. If they have started work, we can attach to their earnings to recover it if they choose not to repay us directly. So there's a number of mechanisms we can go through to recover it. But obviously, yeah, it's a large amount, but actually over 6 years, when you break it down as a proportion of the overall housing benefit, it's actually quite a small percentage.
And a number of individuals.
Yeah.
As well, yeah.
And because we live in a sort of a seasonal area where we've got people who are on housing benefit, then they go into seasonal work. Sometimes obviously there is that time disparity between obviously information getting to us. That's where a lot of the overpayments come from, because we continue to pay housing benefit and then we recognise 2 or 3 weeks later they've gone into seasonal work.
Yes,
So then you have to recalculate and recover it that way. Thank you.
thank you. It's great to see that, I think from 3 years in a row, we've been improving our results. And great, again, the satisfaction, 98% satisfaction. I'll go up again next year, I'm sure. You mentioned verbally that on comparison to other councils we're doing well. Is there any way the DAP could look at benchmarking? We don't need to see who our comparators are, but it's quite good. If I wouldn't be ready for this report, because you're still probably playing on that thing, but maybe something to think about how we could sort of, we're always looking for sort of external evidence. That's another benchmark we could use. So,
Yeah, happy to take that as an action.
I leave that allow them to.
Yeah, you just trying to get the figures on how much better than housing we are.
Well, I imagine the well, anyway, no, but I think that, Councillor Bush, thank you.
Sorry.
With any comparable councils, really, I think, I mean, I'll leave it with you, maybe. But I think it's always good to have those measures, I think.
So a lot of them will be reasonable, which so SIP will give us these sort of classifications on substantial reasons. So I think most of them probably are reasonable across the board, but there is, I think, a way of looking at numbers substantial, reasonable,
Yes.
limited, no assurance opinions provided, and sort of categorise, sort of provide the benchmarking in that respect. Some councils are more reasonable than substantial, or vice versa. So
Right. We'll see what you come up with.
We've got an apprentice with us at the moment who I'm sure will enjoy doing some research.
I mean, what to do is that we look good as council, that's the idea. We decide, so with politics, we decide what we include it or not. Thank you for that. Thank you. So the next question, yes, sorry.
You mentioned that food safety and procurement have been delayed to next year. Can you just confirm, are they the only ones that were on the original plan that have been delayed and haven't been delivered? Or are there any others that have changed or been delayed during the year? So I couldn't find that detail in the report, so I apologize if it's just not on.
yes, I think they were substantially the only two that we deferred to this financial year. So we'll do it this year.
Yeah, thank you.
You want to update, I was looking at you, do you want to update us where we are with procurement or food safety?
Yeah, I mean, procurement's one of the recommendations later on the annual governance.
Yes.
Procurement. And the procurement strategy is coming to strategy and resources shortly for consideration. But it was really just to come back on Naomi's point. Obviously, every year we normally don't complete every audit on the plan. The audit plan is quite flexible, and sometimes there'll be maybe different audits that might come in due to something that's come up in the year, and then maybe due to resource constraints, 1 or 2 audits that might just get pushed into the early part of the next financial year. So it's really just to give that context to members that we very rarely do we complete 100% of every single audit in 1 year, and you get the assurance rating on that. There's always a sort of time limit.
It seemed brilliant that there were only 2 that have been moved.
Sure.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good.
And Chair, can I just add, obviously, it's a really positive report, and just to add our thanks.
Yeah, I was just thank you.
Paul as well for the last 3.5 years. Obviously, as you know, Chair, we joined the partnership 4 years ago.
Yes.
It was a really positive move from where we were with internal audit, which was provided by a sort of a major accounting firm. We moved to the partnership. And obviously it's been a real sort of step change really that we've had quite a bit of challenge, which has been really well received. The risk matrix we had at the outset, as Paul said, we had quite a lot of red on that, which obviously was a different story to what we had from the previous internal auditors that we were obviously getting. So, but the team worked really closely with Adam and the team, and that's been welcomed. And as you see, we've obviously stepped in the right direction with the audits that have come through this year in terms of only one that's been limited. And obviously a lot of that credit's down to the relationship between ourselves and Devon Audit Partnership. So big thanks to Paul for obviously the support you've given us, but also the guidance and expertise that the whole team have given us, because that's been really welcomed and moving us into the sort of the next era, because we knew Paul was retiring at early heads up, obviously that Brad was coming on board, and we've met with the team. And that hopefully puts us in a strong position moving forwards as well.
Yeah, thanks.
And we wish Paul all the well for
We do.
his future with his
Yes.
allotment, and
Yeah.
look forward to
Thank
hearing
you.
what's being grown and sold.
Next part, it's hard to go through.
Could I just remind you, John, that you're not allowed to sell produce from your allotment?
Oh, really?
I'm going to declare an interest in chair.
That's premise, isn't it? Yeah.
Charitable donation.
Thank you. I think I've mentioned before, I think sort of, myself and is it the vice chair, we have an invite to various events. Joe Clark can make it, so if anyone is interested in coming along these network events, I'm sure we can get to the agreement. John and I also go to some events, don't we? And you have full meetings at County Hall. Part of non-core, but which I attend as well.
Yeah.
The chair. Thank you. Right. Compensation payments, item 8, I'm looking for head of customer service. Thank you.
Evening, councillor. So yes, this is the annual report on the compensation that we have awarded via our feedback process. 4.3 obviously highlights over the last 12 months up until end of March 24, the compensation we have paid out to our customers. The details are there obviously for your interest. Very similar to last year. I had a look at last year's report to see what the differences were. And it is very similar. A couple extra for waste and recycling. I think everyone was aware of some of the issues we had last summer. So that does really highlight that. But yeah, obviously happy to answer any questions regarding that or feedback or anything related.
You may not remember this, but I just wondered if you do happen to remember the £250 that was paid for planning.
Yeah, so I did look that one up because I thought I might get asked about that one. So yes, that was regarding a pre-application. So a bit like last year, we had one for a pre-application. It was basically where we didn't do what we were meant to do at the pre-application process. And the customer obviously made a complaint. It's rare. We obviously hand out compensation. It is for exceptional circumstances. So all I can say is there obviously were exceptional circumstances in this case that actually made our independent feedback team feel that £250 was the right way to go. I don't have any specific details about it, but I know it was a pre-application rather than an actual rather than an actual application in the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bushell, I noticed his hand. I couldn't see his face.
Well, Councillor Quinn was before me. Sarah, nice to see you. It feels like an age since we've.
I'm always here, Matt.
I'm always glad to see you in the office. We see that this compensation for planning.
Yes.
Is that the total amount? Have we refunded any application fees for those who have gone to non-determination? Is that covered, or is
No,
this a planning thing?
That's a planning thing. This is purely the feedback process, so the complaints process. So this is where somebody has come to feedback to say, I didn't get the service I paid for. And that's been investigated at stage 1 and stage 2, and that's where the compensation. If something's not been determined via the planning process, then that is absolutely separate, yeah.
John, you look like you have an answer. to the amount which we've repaid?
No, I was just staring at you, councillor Bushell.
Maybe ask for that to come back to the meeting then. If things aren't, because I think
Can we
I think
email
that
it?
actually is sort of in this, and perhaps it should be reported as a payment, because it is a repayment for a non-delivery, it's a service.
This is not really a planning item, John.
Yeah, it's separate to compensation, because compensation is for a specific reason.
Yeah,
Obviously, planning refunds and sent through non-determination obviously is a separate part of the service. So, but quite rightly looking at obviously future service things that you might want to come to governance.
yeah.
If you want to have a look at level of planning income and level of planning non-determinations, etc., and amounts that refunded, you could have that information reported to a future committee, or you could have it passed out to you as part of an email if you want that separately, Chair.
I think,
Disagree with John on this one, that I feel that those repayments are compensations. And I wonder whether we could just let Sarah have those details to add into her reports. Because it is a repayment for a missed service.
So this report is based on the feedback process as determined by the LGO. So that's why what's in here is basically purely our actual complaints process that comes outside of the service and we investigate separately. I'm sure we can provide that, but I'm not sure it would be appropriate within this report because it is a separate process, but there isn't any reason why we can't provide it, but just not within this report.
can I share
Suggest.
Councillor Bushell, you send an email to head of service if you want that information.
May I just move that it be added to next agenda for governance? It shouldn't take too long to do that.
And I said just that, if we just get an email,
But I'm happy to pass it just as a motion if somebody wants to second it.
won't be raised next, so a motion on the next item, agenda. Is there a seconder? So send an email,
Thank you.
Councillor Bushell, sign to the head of service. You like the service, that's work.
Yeah, that's fine. Pop it through to me, that's fine. And we'll
Thanks, Jones.
get that sorted.
It is a challenge to look at this, to really look at it with a real context, because when you look at the figures, they're just obviously the figures of compensation, but what they don't necessarily clarify, which maybe we could have at a later date, is what percentage of complaints these then end in compensation.
I think that's first me. I can anticipate a question. So, what I thought I'd bring with me, because every quarter to SMT I present that the previous quarter's figures for both stage 1, stage 2, ombudsman, comments and compliments, which you also get as well, which is lovely. So just so I can, obviously I can include this in future ones, just so it's nice and clear, but just verbally for now, so the last quarter of 23-24, we had 80 stage 1 complaints. The previous year, same quarter, we had 120. So we have seen a decrease of 33% of actual complaints during comparing that same period in 2 years, and also the previous quarter. So quarter 3, we had 148 compared to 80. So I think it shows that we're in a reasonable position at the moment in comparison to both the previous quarter and the year before. Also compliments as an example as well. Quarter 4, we had 42. And the previous year we had 31, so that was a 35% increase in compliments. So I can certainly include that perhaps as an appendix to this, just to give you a.
Yeah.
So you can compare the figures.
I think that
That'd
would
be
be
useful.
excellent. Oh, Councillor Jones.
And yeah, just because there's 1,115 properties for missed collection.
Yeah.
I don't think you probably won't recall this, but some of that was in my ward. I remember raising specifically, because there was such a serious situation where residents were missed for 12 months. I sent you specific emails, but I never had any feedback whatsoever directly from you. And I did contact those individuals, and I don't, at the time when I last spoke to them, I'm not sure if they received compensation or received the second letter that was requested. So it'd be interesting just to know if because it's a lot of money as well, split amongst quite a small amount of people.
Yeah, I must admit, I know I was CC'd into some emails that you sent to Mark. I don't think any were addressed to me specifically, otherwise I would have responded.
it, I specifically put an app.
Right, oh, okay.
On several of them, and I did follow up on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I can only apologise if I didn't come back to you on those.
Thank you.
Our advice is always for the person themselves to put in the complaint.
I think they had complained.
Yeah, well, in which case,
It's resolved now,
If-
because they were missed for 13 times.
right,
Your team had it reported to you multiple times. Nobody picked it up. It was only got picked up when I investigated it. I did a detailed report with a map to identify those issues. It's resolved now, but I'm just intrigued if that level of compensation related to that.
obviously that's Smart's team obviously deal with the actual collections. I know obviously customer services take all those missed reports and pass them through to waste and recycling. I remember at that time because it was a very fraught time, let's face it, for everyone concerned. And it was around the time where there were large changes in the rounds, if you recall. And I know Marcus said we are never, ever going to do that again. Unfortunately, those ones that were getting missed on a regular basis, they were the rural ones because often it was up lanes that the drivers just didn't know to go up. And I absolutely take your point. When that was reported through to customer services, passed through to waste and recycling, that wasn't getting picked up in order to make sure it was resolved in a timely manner. But rather than missed again, it was recycling mainly, I think, from memory. So everyone that put in an official complaint would have had their stage 1 response. If they weren't happy with that, they would have had a stage 2 response. That's investigated outside the service. And it's at that point the team look at exactly what happened and deem whether compensation is appropriate. I don't know specifically because obviously I don't do it day to day, but I would be very surprised if some of those properties and some of that compensation wasn't surrounding that specific issue at that time. But I can't answer you with specifics, unfortunately, but I would imagine it probably was, yeah.
The main thing is resolved,
It's resolved, yeah.
and then we know you're in place, so one other thing that you'll be chasing.
I mean, one thing I do have that might be useful, I did work out the number of missed as in relation to the number we collected. So because it does seem like a lot, and I appreciate in each area when you get them in your patch, it is intense. But so for 2022, for instance, percentage of recycling reported being missed was 0.27%. Last year, when we knew things weren't great and we knew there was those issues, it went up to 0.32%. So it is an issue in those areas, but over the whole area, fortunately, it is still very, very minor when we're looking at these service issues.
I think I said last year, I said, it was my first meeting. It did seem quite low. I mean,
Yeah.
zero compliance would be great.
Yeah, no, of course, but we're all human, unfortunately, and we're always going to be fallible to
Probably
human
have
error.
questions, but is there any way we can again benchmark? You mentioned this is all completely in line with a certain requirement. Is there any way you can benchmark with other councils at all? Do you have any networks that we could?
Well, we do often get a lot of FOIs about Miss Bins, funnily enough. And so obviously that's all published on our website. And I would imagine all other authorities probably have exactly the same inquiries. So it would be published on their website. So it might just be a bit of research to see actually what's available.
Again,
Yeah,
to repeat myself out the order.
yeah, absolutely.
Adam, can I leave that to you?
Yeah. Oh, I'll leave it, that's fine. I'll leave that to you. I don't know. That's fine.
I think the drive from the take home is that once it was flagged up, things were fixed.
Yes.
I know I spoke to Councillor Jones about this because he had a lot of issues and
Yeah.
a lot of casework for it. And I said, yes, well, we had a situation like that in my ward, but really rather quickly it was resolved. It was painful.
That's the main thing.
But it's important to note that it's been very proactively resolved, and the channels that we're using are working when things are highlighted.
Yeah, and complaints are definitely down on that score. And actually, in customer services, the calls regarding Miss Bins, I normally spend a day a week in customer services, and they are much lower. So we're in a good place, but obviously summer is coming.
Mrs. What did you have a question?
No, what I was going to say is, you pay compensation, have things been put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again, or is this just a thing that will always happen and it's not?
Yeah, no, so obviously when it gets to a compensation level, obviously it is stage 2. We offer that because as we said, as I said earlier, it's where something has gone so wrong, it has had a detrimental effect on that individual household. If it happens again, they go to the ombudsman. And so we don't currently have, without touching wood here, we don't currently have any ombudsman cases for waste and recycling. So on that basis, because after stage 2, we can't do anything with it after stage 2, it's automatic ombudsman. So we would hear about it by the ombudsman.
And I think you get a letter once. Do I get a letter, John, or did you?
Yes.
Want to
Well,
year?
it lists the number of ombudsman cases
Yes.
and how many have been found,
Yeah.
etc. So
And it's very low last year, and
it was,
looking
It's
at
the
that.
annual government,
it is, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
you read them all.
Councillor Jones, have you that yet?
Yeah, just an interesting one is, so when there is an ongoing case such as that, where it's been raised to the higher level, it was something we've brought up several times now. I believe it's being acted on, but we haven't yet received the updates, which were to just have a regular-ish, whatever's practical update, be it monthly, every 2 months or quarterly, giving us an update on complaints in each area in terms of waste from
Each
recycling.
district, yeah.
We were, and the other thing that would also be interesting is if there are cases where, if we've got situations where there is an ongoing issue, if it's not a breach of GDPR, it would be beneficial for councillors to be aware of those issues, because we could quite easily walk into a situation where there's an ongoing situation that we're not aware of. Does that make sense?
I would suggest it would be a GDPR issue because we wouldn't have the permission of the person concerned, that we can share it with any third parties, whether it be council or a member of the public, unfortunately. Sorry.
Mr. Trigg.
Yeah, again, just to follow that, because we had the same conversation at Policy Development Committee, didn't we, around when Mark was presenting the waste and recycling project. So the action that was taken away from that was Mark was going to have a look at a regular report to members in terms of where there were those issues. So he has taken that action on board, so that should be coming out. And again, we had a similar conversation about could you have access to the data. But we did confirm then at that meeting, again, that would be obviously GDPR. Thank you. Challenge in terms of the access to that, but the reporting should be able to come out to you and Mark pick them up.
Okay, and to be sure it's subject to agenda if there's a lot of issues, because we can put it on the agenda. Let's see what's good. Anyone else? Questions? No, thank you. Right. Big one. Item 9, Chief Executive draft statement of accounts 23-24. I'm sure I was read it, but John will do a detailed.
I hope so, Chair. I'll just give a summary of the statement of account rather than take you through all the 20 of pages. So members, the statement of accounts in item 9, I'm going to refer to the agenda page numbers, which are at the bottom of your papers, and that starts on page 69 for the draft statements. So these are the accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2024, which I signed on the 31st of May. The statutory date is the public inspection date that has to have commenced by the first working day in June. So as of the 3rd of June, 65 out of 164 districts have published their draft accounts, so around 40%. We were fortunate enough to be one of those. So that's a positive story for the authority in that the accounts have been published. A number of authorities are still working on their accounts. Some will be published in June, some are coming a little bit later. That follows on obviously the audit challenge that took place over the last couple of years from external audit. We recognised, I think, at the last meeting when we had Bishop Fleming come along to introduce themselves, a significant number of audits have still not been carried out across the sector for a number of authorities preceding 23-24. Some haven't had their 22-23 accounts signed off. Some even go back to earlier years, such as 19-20. Fortunately, we're in a strong position. Our 22-23 accounts were signed off. You received those earlier in the year. And obviously now you have the 23-24 accounts in front of you. So the external audit of the accounts by Bishop Fleming, that will take place through August and September, and that will be concluded through October. So you should receive their audit findings at your November governance meeting, and the aim will be that you'll receive an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, and then those accounts should be formally signed off at full council on the 20th of November. In terms of the structure of the accounts, probably the most interesting part, I should say they're all interesting, but the more interesting part of the accounts are the first 10 pages that start on page 70. And this is the narrative report, and that just sets out the challenges the authority faces, how we as a council aim to meet those challenges through our medium-term financial planning, and also it reviews the last financial year 23-24. So the first part of the narrative report just talks about some of the challenges we faced nationally, challenges that face the country, the cost of living pressures. UK inflation rate when we presented the accounts last year started at 2.9% at the start of the 21-22 year, and had risen to around 11% in April 22, and that double-digit inflation continued through 22-23. In 23-24, we've seen a gradual easing, and obviously that finished in the end of the financial year around 4.3%. But the reason I mention that is a lot of that inflation we saw in that period obviously is baked in, and obviously is included then within the ongoing financial position of the authority we then see in 23-24 budget. So even though that inflation has reduced, we are obviously seeing the impact of those inflationary years that obviously do contribute towards the financial pressures we face. Those financial pressures have been built into the medium-term financial plan, and that is also set out on pages 71 and 72. However, the narrative statement is not just forward-looking, it also then reviews the financial year 23-24. And at the Q3 position, we were reporting in December a net forecast surplus of £73,000. We saw some favourable variances in the last quarter, most notably some additional income through business rates and business rates retained through the Devon-wide pool. And I'm pleased to report the final outturn position achieved a net budget surplus of £630,000 against the original budget. The tables on page 74 and 75 just set out those variances in a bit more detail for you. The movement from Q3 of 557, there are a number of ups and downs, but most notably the additional income of business rates of 760,000 is the most notable variances. We also saw some additional income through some government grants. The Building Control Partnership forecast that we were reporting at Q3 had improved in the last quarter with some additional income, and also we saw some reduced spend on agency staff due to actually filling a number of the posts that were identified in the earlier report that obviously came through from Devon Audit Partnership around that limited assurance. So there's been some significant improvement in the Building Control Partnership. The balance of 630,000 that's shown on page 75, the options for those balances that are being proposed is to place those back into our earmark reserves. Firstly, putting £150,000 into our corporate property income volatility reserve. That was a reserve that was set up when we first bought the Green Lane Shopping Centre to protect the council against fluctuations in income that potentially, if we lost a major retailer and we saw a decline in income through one of the years, it allowed us to use that reserve to smooth that effect. We experienced that in 23-24 with the loss of the Wilko store in Green Lanes, obviously losing a major retailer, a significant amount of income, and also being landlord, then we're responsible for the service charge until we find a new retailer to go in there. We're fortunate to work closely with Praxis, and we managed to get Poundland in there quite early, but there were a number of months obviously of vacancy that obviously we're responsible for. Obviously getting Poundland in there enables us to protect the revenue position ongoing, because we'll start to get the revenue benefits of that through 24-25, but we had to use that reserve that was originally set up. So part of using this year's surplus is to put money back into that reserve, and that helps protect the authority moving into 24-25. It's also proposed to put £280,000 into our insurance reserve, and that's to mitigate against higher insurance premiums that we're experiencing as part of the 24-25 renewals. So we budgeted for an insurance renewal. Those costs are coming in a lot higher, and most notably the insurance on this site at Grimsworthy with the process hall, we're experiencing some additional insurance pressures there as well due to the renewal prices. Putting money into the reserve in 23-24 allows us to smooth that effect for the 24-25 financial year. And then thirdly, £200,000 into our digital transformation financial system reserve. bit of a mouthful. Putting £200,000 into that reserve, we're coming up to the end of the 5-year contracts for our major core financial systems. So that's the accounting systems, debtors and creditors, and also our revenues and benefits, council tax and business rate system. Renewing those contracts with inflationary pressures, we're seeing that obviously the contract renewal was going to come in significantly higher than what we originally had in the base budget. So putting money into this reserve allows us again to smooth that effect over the forthcoming budgets that we've got coming in. The narrative statement report also then touches on the green names position. Members will recall we bought the shopping centre in June, or approved in June 21, and we completed on the acquisition in November 2021. And the financial modelling from the income generated through the revenues at the centre would cover both the loan repayments and also the management costs in managing the centre. In 21-22, the net return to the authority was just under £250,000. In 22-23, the trading position produced a net return of 291,000. And in 23-24, taking into account the transfer from the income volatility reserve, the trading position produced a net return of 237,000. It's pleasing to show that the acquisition of the shopping centre is contributing financially back to the authority. And also moving forwards, we have now filled that large retail unit that Wilko were occupying, and the number of vacancies we have in the centre are very small. So we're in a strong position moving forwards with the shopping centre into 24-25. So, Chair, that's a positive return for the council and in line with our original forecasting for the shopping centre. The level of reserves is also set out within the narrative report, and that shows that we have a general fund reserve of 1.238 million. That's unchanged from the last few financial years, and that equates to around about 8.5–9% of our net revenue budget. And the recommended level for this size of authority is between 5 and 10%. So we're on the slightly upper end of the recommended level for a general fund reserve. And we have £10.5 million worth of earmarked reserves, and a breakdown of those is shown in the detailed statements on note 11 on pages 127 and 128. And those balances do leave the council in a strong position moving into the risks and challenges we face in 24-25. The medium-term financial forecasts are shown within the narrative statement on pages 71 and 72. They're refreshed annually, and they are approved as part of the budget setting that comes to members in the February 4 councils. There is continued pressure and uncertainty on the council's financial position moving forwards due to the funding uncertainty from government as we move into 25-26. The original fair funding review has been moved down the line a number of years. Obviously, we have the election coming up, so any financial settlement for 25-26 is likely again to be a one-year settlement, because any new government coming in is obviously going to take time for that to unwind in terms of looking at a fair funding review moving forwards. Likewise, the business rate retention changes, which potentially reset the business rate growth, again, we're forecasting is being delayed by a further 2 years until at least April 2026. The medium-term financial forecast gaps are shown on page 72 that highlights a £500,000 budget gap for 25-26, and then that significant increase to around £3 million for 26-27 onwards. That's due to that change with the business rate income. It's a worst-case scenario position, and there is likely to be transitional arrangements in place. But with that uncertainty, we need to plan for that moving forwards and put in measures to try and bring in additional income to try and reduce that budget gap further. Following on from the narrative statement, you have the key performance indicators that are reported through the strategy and resources. They're shown on pages 81 to 87. And then we move into the core main statements in the accounts that starts on page 89. That starts with the comprehensive income and expenditure statements, which in essence is your profit and loss account. That includes a number of non-cash accounting entries that are shown against service areas such as capital charges for depreciation, pension, valuation adjustments, etc. They are then reversed out through the movement in reserve statement that's shown on page 91. So at the moment on page 89, it shows an £18.2 million bottom line. A lot of that is reversed out due to those accounting entries. The most notable statement is the movement in reserve statement, which is on pages 90 and 91. On page 91, you can then see at the bottom the movement in those balances I referred to your general fund balance and your earmarked reserves, and also then your other cashable reserves, such as capital receipts reserve and your capital grants and applied. So that gives you total usable reserves of 17.5 million, which is a slight increase on what we were holding at the 31st of March 2023. The balance sheet of the authority is shown on page 92, and that shows that the council has net assets of £125 million. That's an £18 million increase on the net assets that were shown at 22-23 year. A couple of reasons behind that is your long-term assets at the very top. These are the sort of fixed assets of the authority, the property, plant and equipment. That's increased by 14 million from last year. Majority of that is down to sort of revaluation increases in our assets. So we revalue the assets every year. A number of those assets will go up in value. Some of them will decrease. There are also additions to assets. So if we bought property for temporary accommodation, if we require vehicles through finance leases, that would all go in as additional assets the authority is then holding on to. And also where we've spent money on enhancing assets as well. Depreciation comes off those assets, but there's a net movement of £14 million in a positive direction in terms of the value of those assets. You then see your current assets and current liabilities. There's been a decrease in long-term liabilities by £4 million. Long-term borrowing has maintained its same level as at the 31st of March 24 compared to where we were at 22-23 of £3 million. The finance lease liabilities for vehicles has increased by £1.3 million. That's due to new vehicles coming in. Obviously, you've seen the new fleet for recycling vehicles. Those new vehicles coming in then increases that finance lease liability because we have those future obligations to repay those leases over the next number of years. We also then see the pension fund liability. That's reduced from 14 million to 8.5 million, quite a significant reduction. And that's down to changes in financial assumptions with the pension fund investments. There'll be assumptions made on pension increases, salary increase assumptions. It also looks at mortality forecasts, etc., and all of that feeds into the valuation of the pension fund liabilities into the long term. Those pension liabilities are made good by revaluation every 3 years, and then made good by future contributions that the employer will make over the long term. You then have the authority's cash flow statement on page 93, and this just breaks down how the cash that the authority is holding is generated and how it uses its cash and cash equivalents. And then you have a couple of pages called the collection fund, and this is, as the billing authority, we're responsible for collecting all of the council tax and business rates. This statement just sets out how much we collect and how we distribute that to the major preceptors. The next part of the accounts, which starts on page 96 through 115, the accounts and policies. I'm not going to go through those. They are the rules and concepts that set out how the accounts are prepared, but I can confirm there's no material changes for the 23-24 year. And then starting on page 116, you have notes to the accounts for about 50 pages, and these are various disclosures and notes that break down the financial figures in a bit more detail. Page 165 is the draft auditor's report. You'll see that page is blank, and that's because the audit of the accounts will take place in the summer, and then you'll receive their opinion once the audit has been concluded. And Chair, that's the whistle-stop tour of the accounts. The recommendations on page 67 in 2.1 that the draft 23-24 statement of accounts be approved. Thank you. Audit.
So this is why and you got your holiday right after this, didn't you? Finish this, then went on with holiday.
I actually signed these off whilst I was on holiday.
I wasn't sure. I thought I'd get it. Clarify, this goes to full council. Where am I?
Yeah, they go.
For our chairman of the council and the council worker will sign them off if we're agreed. Okay.
Well, Chair, there'll be auditors first, and then the auditor's report comes here, and then subject to governance committee being happy with the auditor's report, that goes on to full council then for the chair to sign, subject to full council approval.
Right, this is where you cash on numbers now. So. Councillor Special.
Just out of interest, how much of the property value variance is due to green names, and is it positive or negative for that asset?
The valuation of green names actually went down, and that's because it's based on the value of revenue being generated at the point of the valuation being done. So as at the end of March, obviously with Wilko having come out of the centre, the overall value of green lanes obviously had been reduced because we lost one of the major income generators for the centre. We had a new tenant in there, but obviously with a new tenant going in, there is often then a rent-free period for that new tenant to go in there. the benefit of that tenant would then be seen in 24-25. So actually the overall value of Green Lanes as a whole would have been lower at the end of 23-24 compared to what it was at the end of 22-23.
The value of the land doesn't go up or down, it's just the revenue that it brings in.
The value of the centre is based on the overall revenue that it generates, because obviously in a sense that is the value of that asset holding that you've got based on the strength of those leases that you have, and obviously the value of the income that you're likely to generate from those leases. So it's a snapshot point in time. Obviously we bought Green Lanes for a certain amount of money. That value at the end of March would have been obviously slightly lower due to the loss of that major tenant. But obviously then moving in 24-25, we would see that value go back up. So it's about having that long-term look at the shopping centre in terms of where we see that value going. Obviously we didn't buy the shopping centre to make money. We bought it to have that control over that asset. And obviously the key thing for us was getting a major tenant back in there to give us that strength of tenancy moving into 24-25. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
It's just staying with Green Lanes, just what has been brought up. There was talk, about this time last year, I believe, about potentially exciting opportunities that were being discussed. I think they weren't disclosed at the time, but I haven't heard anything since about that. Are those discussions still ongoing, or is that fallen aside?
Yep, those discussions are still ongoing. Obviously, the concentration had to be on the dealing with the loss of the Wilco unit. So the focus sort of did turn on to making sure that was rectified quickly. But we still have discussions ongoing with Praxis, who are our asset managers, and potential tenants for the vacant units. And obviously one of those units obviously is the ex-BHS unit. We do have charity in there. But there are talks with potential long-term tenants for that unit as well. So they are ongoing. We have Praxis coming in to meet with us next week, and that's talking about that long-term strategy about that unit as well.
This might be a question for Councillor Walker as the commercialisation side. I think before the purchase of Green Lanes, there was some talk about looking into the avenue of having some office space within there. Is that still part of the development plan?
Yeah, that's
I
right.
don't mind you answering.
Yeah, no, even back, Councillor, do you mean the customer service, or something back of house?
No, we were looking at having office space being rented rather than the hub thing, which
Alright,
it's not really revenue generating.
no, so you mean somewhere else there is office space, isn't there?
But it's going back a number of years, so maybe.
Obviously within Green Lanes, obviously we are looking at the hub, which obviously is at the moment the unit that we're looking for the hub, which is obviously going to be the council services and potentially other stakeholders as well. Bringing those stakeholders together so that customers obviously have that experience all under one roof. That's being looked at. Those costs of that unit we've picked up since day one. So in a sense, we're already picking up those costs as landlord because it was a vacant unit that was not being re-let. The timescale of that, we're about to go out to tender in terms of
2 weeks.
the works associated with that hub, with a view then that we'll have that open obviously in this financial year. That obviously then potentially allows us to look at our other assets. Obviously part of that is obviously Linton House. We have obviously office space in there that's currently being utilised. That allows us to review Linton House as well, potentially see if there's any space there that we might be able to generate income through letting that for office space as well. And also as part of our wider asset management plan, we've got an asset management strategy coming to members shortly. That is around maximising the use of all of our assets. So all of the asset holdings, so the 125 million that I just touched on in terms of our fixed assets, making sure we're getting the best use out of those. And if not, do we need to switch some of those assets? And some of that may be around income generating, whether that be through office space, whether it be through different alternative uses. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Just page 75, just looking at the movements, if I've read correctly, I don't know whether it's good news or bad news that we see crematorium increased by 41k. But one thing that does raise a question, I think we have discussed it before, it'd be good just to add some clarity, is the fall in revenue from parking. If we read into that, does that mean that we're seeing a reduction of footfall across across the town centre and other areas where our parking is, or do we have any more context as to what that is?
Yeah, so the reduction in parking charge notices, so it's actually fines, so that's a reduction in income we get from fines, which I suppose from our perspective is negative, because that's a reduction in our income, but I suppose you could look at that as a positive, that actually that there are less fines being issued. So that means that obviously customer behaviour is improving. We're also, CEOs, our enforcement officers are trying to work with customers around obviously making sure that we are, in a sense, managing the car park more effectively. So part of that is a reduction in the number of notices we are issuing. Part of that also was an accounting error on bad debt provision from the year before. So the 89,000 wasn't all reduction in income. Part of it was an accounting adjustment relating to the 22-23 year in relation to a provision for bad debt. Now, unfortunately, we got round the wrong way. So we corrected that in 23-24, but that has a negative effect on our level of income in 23-24. So corrected it to make sure the 23-24 statements are correct.
And you wouldn't expect to see a similar number next year?
Hopefully not, because that accounting entry would have been corrected, and also the budget for 24-25 has been reflected to show the level of reduced parking fine income that we've been seeing that's current for the last year, to make sure that's reflected in the budget for this year. So I hope to not see any reduction in parking fine income next year.
Is it also worth mentioning about the reason for the additional income for the young crematorium? Is that one of the?
Yeah,
that one of the questions?
I think that's the one.
You can answer that.
Yeah.
Chair, Vice Chair.
I'm Vice Chair of the
Vice Chair.
Crematorium Committee. The reason for the increase in the money that's going to be the authority by the crematorium is twofold. Yet, unfortunately, there has been a higher death rate this last financial year, which means that obviously we get more income. But also, we've introduced a lower direct cremation fee particularly for people who live in the area, so they don't have to use these direct cremation type companies advertised on the TV. I mean, you can actually get a direct cremation done at our crematorium through one of the local undertakers for less than £1,000, which when people are having a lot of issues with losing a loved one and having to pay for things like that is very good. I mean, basically, it's because the crematorium is well managed and we brought in these ideas. Also, a lot of money, time and effort has been spent on making sure that the crematorium is a nice place to go and people want to stay here and not go to other crematoria in the area, because they realise that we treat them with dignity and respect throughout the whole process, and the gardens are kept up beautifully, so it's somewhere people want to come back to.
It's also worth mentioning that actually the direct cremation organisations, I think it's Landover, have actually stopped coming to our area like entirely because so many local people are now using our service, meaning their loved ones are staying locally. It also means they can actually be there at the start in the morning and actually see the process, although it's not a service. So they get that extra closure that they just don't get when the person has to be transported such a long way away.
And also we can return ashes very quickly, which is
same day
a very positive thing to be able to do in family way, that sort of thing. So it's just the fact that personally, I think our crematorium is extremely well managed, and we're about to have a new manager in the crematorium because our current one is retiring soon. And I think that the replacement manager will be as good, if not better. Well, not better. Can't be really better than that, but different. And we'll bring the crematorium on further and bring new ideas and looking at sort of reducing the carbon footprint of the crematorium and various things like that. Because obviously very gas guzzling at the moment.
I'm sure £1,000 for a crematorium thing is very competitive. It seems like a lot of money to me.
No, that's
the funeral.
That's the funeral directors. So that's the total amount, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our element is 350.
350, yeah.
Whereas the rest is actually for the actual
So you
funeral
could just,
director.
I'm thinking about me, because I don't want to spend any money on getting rid of me.
You don't have to use a funeral director if you don't want.
It's easier to dig a hole for some action.
Can I get one back on track? Thank you, thank you. Any other,
Whitmore.
councillor Whitmore, yes, Mrs Whitmore,
Your future high street fund is 6.8 million. Is any of that made up of grants? And if so, are any of those are they time constraints and likely to be returned?
So the overall Future High Street Fund project is around 11 million. 6.5 million of that was central government grant, the other 4.5 million was our money. There was a time limit on the 6.5 million. That was originally had to all be spent by 31st of March 2024. Due to contract pressures, inflationary pressures, government allowed us to apply for extensions. So we've got an extension to ensure that the grant is committed by September 2024. And by committed, that means you're in contract and you're committed to getting the works carried out with all monies to be spent by March 2025. So we are now in contract for the elements of the Future High Streets Fund. So we've completed the Panion Market works. We're in contract for the works on 36-37 Balfour Street. And we're also in contract and starting works, obviously, as we know, on the Queen Street, Bear Street car park. Obviously, that's currently out of commission in certain areas. So those works are now contractually committed. So we've ticked those boxes for
Does that
government
mean you
funding.
don't have to return it?
You don't have to return that funding. And we're also making sure that the elements of government grant are spent first before we spend the 4.5 million that's our money.
Yeah.
So then the amount of borrowing that we're taking on will come later in the day, which enables Adam to manage the treasury management and cash flows a lot more effectively.
Thank you.
Howard, please.
Thank you. On page 72, second paragraph after the table that begins, in order to agree some parameters around this approach, members approved a commercialisation strategy at full council in November 2020. The strategy is currently being refreshed and will be approved by members in the summer. How do we know the members will approve it? I mean, they're quite a volatile bunch, aren't they?
I was being aspirational that members would hopefully approve it. Obviously, the commercialisation strategy isn't changing fundamentally. So members approved that in November 2020. We've refreshed it because obviously our context has changed. Obviously, the world was a different place to what it was in 2020 when that first came forwards. We've bought Green Lane Shopping Centre since then. So we've uplifted it to bring it up to date. There's not material fundamental changes about what we want to do to try and bring certain income in.
So it's mildly.
So it's mildly refreshed. It's not fundamentally refreshed. So I'm hoping that members see that and adopt it.
Aspirational. Thank you.
Thank you. Just got a question to show that I've read the report. Actually, I think the last time was very good questions to show that in a year a lot of interest in it. Transfer conveniences, is that sort of investment you had to put into the conveniences before they transferred to benefits?
Yes, so
75.
we originally set out obviously to transfer the public conveniences over to parishes. That's taken slightly longer than we anticipated. So part of the reason why there was a 75,000 hit in the last year was that some of that work is obviously delayed into this financial year.
Right.
So the contact with town and parishes is obviously ongoing. We've agreed heads of terms with some of those towns and parishes. The legal conveyancing is taking place at the moment, so we're just a little bit behind the curve in terms of the original timeline.
Favourable variance temporary accommodation costs. Is that due to us purchasing accommodation?
It's
Our numbers dipping.
partly to do with that. So when we originally forecast in Q3, we were forecasting a certain number of temporary accommodation placements. That reduced slightly in the last quarter. It's gone back up again more recently. And so that is obviously benefited the budget in the last quarter. And some of that will be because we have bought our own properties and started to place people into some of those properties in that last quarter, where we then see the financial benefit because we're using our own accommodation. We're not putting people into the more expensive bed and breakfast accommodation, but we're able to claim housing benefit subsidy on those properties as well. And therefore that's a net benefit to the council by putting people into our own properties as early as possible.
One final one, business rate income, 750,000. Is that new businesses? Or
The
760 is.
760.
Yeah.
It's growth in business rates. So when we originally set the budget, we'd anticipated a certain amount of growth. There can be growth and there can be decline. So that's the net benefit of that growth. It's also, so it would be where maybe rateable values have gone up.
Right.
It will also be where maybe vacant units have now got businesses in, and therefore we're getting business rates from those businesses. And then a chunk of that money also is the return through the Devon-wide benefit, Devon-wide pool benefit.
Sure, cool.
Because depending on how Devon has performed overall, rather than all of the growth going back to central government, some of that growth gets redistributed through Devon. And because Devon overall has seen growth, every Devon authority then gets the benefit, who's in that pool gets the benefit of a redistribution. So we've seen a bigger return on that than we originally anticipated when we set the budget.
Good, well, thank you, councillor. Oh.
Just a point rather than a question, which is,
Make it quick.
we all see what's going on nationally and the challenges with councils are facing. And I think the rest of the committee will join me in saying, well done and thank you to the team for doing such a good job of managing so efficiently when we're seeing such increases in inflation, challenges that we're facing ourselves with the situations that we've seen in the shopping centre. So I think we can all be confident in the team that we have doing such a good job. So a genuine thank you.
Thank you for my closing remarks. Thank you.
Just to add to that, Jeff, I'll pass that through to the heads of service, because all of the teams are responsible for managing their own budgets effectively, so.
And next 2 months, nothing work. Right, can I have a mover, please? And second, all in favour? Everyone, thanks. Mr. Bush, your hand up.
Yeah, you
Thank you.
Sorry, I was getting excited ready for having
Sir.
Don't usually get that response.
It looks very
So,
much like Officer Triggs has changed his glasses to be more like yours, so I think.
Right, so moving on, thank you. Item 10, annual governance statement. Governance, thank
Thank you,
you.
Chair. The annual governance statement formally records the arrangements we have in place to ensure that our functions are carried out effectively based on the core principles of the governance framework. This gives the reassurance that our decisions are lawful, public money is safeguarded, and resources are used to their best potential. Our framework includes the work of the Strategy and Resources Committee and full council in setting the budget, strategy and corporate objectives, the work of this committee in managing risk and reviewing the audit reports, alongside the work of the senior management team and the corporate risk group. The review of our governance arrangements has been supported by our internal auditors, who have carried out 16 audits during 23-24. And as we've already heard from Paul, our overall assessment was that we have a generally sound system of governance, risk management and control as well. However, we have identified some areas we would like to improve, such as reviewing the requirements of the Local Government Transparency Code, updating the procurement strategy, and getting ready for the new Procurement Act, which comes into force in October 24, updating our asset management plan, commercialisation strategy and housing strategy, subject to member approval, of course. And the full assessment can be found in Appendix B. The views of external auditors, Bishop Fleming, will be included in the final annual governance statement when it's considered by full council post their audit of our accounts. The recommendation is that the draft governance, annual governance statement be approved.
Thank you. Have we got an expert in the room that wants something? No? Okay. Put you on the spot. Any questions?
Yes, when I went through it with a fine tooth comb, I noticed that assurances provided often just came from internal audit. And some of those reports were even like 18 months ago. Do you get it from anywhere else? And I can't bring it up in front of me right now to give you an example, but, and I don't want to be seen to suggest you should do stuff, because obviously that's your job, but would it be suitable to have other assurance included in it?
Of course, we do look for external assurance where we can get that. As you'll see from the sort of main report, we've had peer reviews in the past. We've touched on the ombudsman reports and complaints, so we do try and get so much feedback externally as we can. Also, the internal audit is a good source, and that plan is a rolling one. So those audits you touched on are perhaps a little out of date for the financial year we're looking at, but they will be refreshed as we go. And obviously they are the in-depth report, but yeah, we're very open to wherever we can get the assessments.
From an accessibility point of view, I like the fact that you've used colours like red to be really bold in the fact that you've identified that there are things we're not doing as well as we should do, instead of hiding it in the detail. I like that. There were no significant issues highlighted. Is that right? There aren't any?
In terms of some of the improvements, there are areas that we would like to look at. I mean, sort of, last year when external audit, did a whole review, they didn't come up with any governance improvements that were required. But we have, in dialogue with our internal audit, we have suggested some, and they are outlined in the report. Some I touched on. There's others, as again Paul mentioned, where we want to review some of our top strategies and just make sure they're being refreshed. We want to have a look at our sort of performance. Could we make that a bit better for members of the public? So yeah, there are things that we have found through this report that we would just like to improve rather than anything fundamental.
And my final point, it details 4 complaints that went to the Federal Government Ombudsman. I went and had a look at those complaints and actually could only see 3 that were upheld, including the Cockerell one, which was a nice little read. There were 2 for bins, 1 for Cockerell. What was the 4? Or do we not know?
If you tell me the 3 that are on there, I'll be able to tell you which one was it, possibly.
It was 2 bins, one an annoying Cockerell, and I don't know what the 4th one.
The other one may well have been, it's very difficult because I can't obviously give too much detail, but the other one was very likely regarding a noise complaint, a rural noise complaint. Yeah, that's probably what that's.
That one's not on the Local Government Ombudsman's website.
No, I think it's probably the timing between when it was raised and when but that one again, it wasn't found against us.
Is this the one from Councillor James's ward?
That was bells, but no, this one wasn't. It was noise, but it wasn't bells. No.
There was also a complaint about the noise the lambs were making in that as well.
Mr. Tree.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to Adam's response around the insurance, as well as obviously the insurance that Adam mentioned, we also get each head of service to do an assurance statement. So in terms of where the assurance comes for this statement, every head of service has a responsibility for their service area, making sure they're complying with all of the regulations, financial procedure rules, contract procedure rules, law and regulations. So every head of service has to go through a detailed assessment, identify if there are any impacts from that statement, and then they sign that off, and they're all provided to Adam and the team prior to then the annual government statement being produced. But if there are any issues that are raised, each head of service has a responsibility to sign that assurance statement because they're held to account on that one.
And is that something we can improve today? Is that the bit where they'll detail the timeframes that they'll actually do things with, or is that on the annual government statement?
That will be, was at the back of the annual government statement, but the actions obviously that are coming out of that. So
It'll say who's responsible and the timeframe.
that will detail in terms of the actions we're taking, and obviously then in terms of responsible officers as to who's going to be responsible for implementing those.
And just to add further, those recommendations will be treated then the same as the audit recommendations. They will go on our Ventana system. Brilliant. And they will, in a sense, go from this report onto your audit tracker report. So they'll be able to follow through it. And obviously when those dates will be on them.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, just some points. So, mention was made of the peer review. So, obviously,
Yes.
that is quite an effective tool, and I think the sort of members and officers need to reflect on when next they have a peer review, because I don't think a peer review has been done for a few years.
It says here September, October 21.
One.
Literally the one page of the audit thing I can actually open.
I just clarify, I've spoken to the leader of the council. I think once we get those elections, we can discuss that. They'll be here, I'm not sure it's been discussed, but I think at least start thinking about a date. Also, I mean, it's recommended every 5 years, I think, isn't it?
They had the original in 2019, then they came back and did a refresh, obviously post the.
But it's available online if people want to see it.
So obviously that report was done in 2021. So I think, as you said, once the election's out of the way, then be looking ahead as to when would be the appropriate time to engage with
And
it. Yeah.
the scope of it, yeah. Not with that go, but it's here or that resources that was.
And then I was also going to mention that I mentioned earlier the customer service framework that we're subjecting ourselves to, which again is another validation, external validation of from an independent body of how you're doing on customer service. And then I suppose the final thing I'd just mention is some councils have more an approach to do public surveys, so they go out in a larger scale and sort of ask members of the public, well, how are we doing these areas, and get the sort of public view of which I think there's a lot of dependency on comments and complaints that come in, rather than officers going out and saying, asking people, what are your thoughts on the following? So there's just 3 areas where typically independent assurance can be, obtained at that.
Right, have a proposal? Secondary, Councillor Bushell, thank you. Now, Councillor Square. Oh, sorry, all agreement, thank you. 8 o'clock, so I think we might consider moving a bit faster on some next reports, and I need a couple of break as well, so. 10, statements, 11, review of committee's terms of reference.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a look at the governance committee's terms of reference. Council might recall that governance came out of having sort of 2 committees, the audit committee and the ethics committee. So therefore it is sort of an amalgamation of the 2. From the audit committee perspective, I consider that the terms of reference are fine, but it was in the context of the ethics side that I thought that it was worth a bit of a review. And in a way, so there's quite a few appendices to this report, but it's perhaps easiest to understand them in reverse. So Appendix F sets out a refreshed version of the arrangements that the council is required to have under the Localism Act for dealing with standards complaints. So currently, we've got internally, it isn't on the website or anything. We've just got a sort of flow chart, which is fine. It's just a single page sort of flow chart about how that works. My proposal is that it's replaced with a lot more detail and published on the website with Appendix F to this report, which goes through who the monitoring officer is and the process from the initial investigation of a complaint right the way through to the sanctions that can be applied. So I just think that's more open and it's a much clearer procedure for customers and councillors to understand. Leading on from that, going into Appendix E. So if a complaint goes the whole way, it may well come for a local hearing here. So currently that couldn't really be held with governance committee. So the idea is that we would have a set of arrangements that a smaller panel would go would decide a code of conduct complaints against. So it sets out the kind of terms of reference for such a hearing panel. Going to Appendix D, that then sets out a proposed membership of those hearing panels. This is based on the model that's sort of already in place for the licensing subcommittees. So there's sort of 3 panels. It would depend on availability and who's the who's the subject of the investigation. Fine. Then there's the power that the governance committee in Appendix C would be giving to that, delegating to that panel But to be able to do that, the constitution, so going to appendix B and A, so B is a track change version to show you exactly what is proposed to be changed in the constitution. It shows the that there's an additional power to link in with the powers that the monitoring officer has to enable, because that currently I noted that it's missing, to enable governance committee to deal with, consider and determine complaints relating to the conduct of district and parish councillors, make recommendations to parish councillors or as applicable group leaders, committees and full council. So the recommendation is to recommend that to full council, because it's reserved to full council to approve changes to the constitution, as I'm sure you're aware. And then as a result of those things, then the other appendices fall into place following that, if that changes are approved by full council following your recommendation. I hope that's sort of clear. Any questions?
No? Our proposer, please.
Just,
Right, yes.
just to be sure, so the proposal we.
Oh, yes, sorry. Or
Part
part two, and block.
I just needed to check.
Yeah. So, proposal, council.
Oh, no, can I ask a question?
Sorry, I asked a question, you maybe can be sorry.
Sean, sorry. Just for clarity, we're talking about that additional document as well, aren't we, which is, planning code of conduct as well.
That's the next item.
Yeah, I will hold my question.
I'll look at
It's good to see your hand, it's good to see your hand. No, I think,
Can I ask a really quick
Yes,
question?
please.
I don't know if this is the right time for it or not, but do we publish an annual report in accordance with Deluxe or whatever it's called, Department of Levelling Ups and Housing's audit committee guidance? Because I've not seen it. I'm on the audit committee in line with the constitution.
I'm sure
The does the committee publish an annual report in accordance with the 22 guidance, including compared to the position statement, results of annual evaluation, which I think is what we're talking about later, and how it's fulfilled the terms of reference and key issues as escalated in the year. I think it's like an evaluation of the effectiveness of the audit committee.
So that comes out in one of
So
the
that is published.
13, which is that sort of effectiveness of the committee, that will come out in item 13. So yeah, but that's good point for us.
and particularly the chair does a report, that's our summary of the committee, the meetings.
So there's a 6-monthly report that the chair of governance reports through, which goes through to full council. And then in addition to that, you've got the annual effectiveness of the committee questionnaire, which then every member gets an opportunity to feed into. And then any outputs from that feed into like an action plan in terms of anything that we need to address.
No other questions? Sorry, let's start again. A mover, Councillor Henry Booth, seconder. Councillor Green, thank you. And keep voting, we'll say everything. I take it for granted, I should really, shouldn't I? Not at all. I mean, no.
The break that you.
I'm, having a 5 minute comfort break on short trip, if you can come back in time. Right, thank you. He's going on, has to be all questions from the witness. Can I restart the meeting? Thank you. And I got questions after that one. I don't.
They just stole my badge and ran away.
Shall we? Go to. Item 30. Oh, down to our council. Right, standing code. Conduct.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this came out of some training that we were provided with by a very experienced planning barrister, Tim Leader. He was quite critical of our planning code of conduct during that training, and therefore we conducted a full review of it. And I think the point that was really being put across is that our current planning code of conduct is based heavily on Probity and Planning, which is a local government association guidance document. It sets out how things should be done. And it's and the point that's put across is that it's a best practice guidance. So there's a lot of sound information in that it ought to be followed, but the constitution is where the planning code of conduct sits, and the constitution by law has to be followed to the letter. Otherwise, the council, is clearly in breach of it. So therefore, while the planning code of conduct as drafted is acceptable in principle, it is possible, for example, the example in the report is that perhaps a councillor, it currently says a councillor should be fully informed and be able to provide the planning committee with full reasons as to why they may disagree with a planning officer's recommendation. And it might be that while that is appropriate, from a code of conduct perspective, it could be acceptable that they're not fully informed, and during the meeting, it is the reasoning is considered, and even the planning committee is adjourned to do so. And the issue being that inevitably the council would be in breach of its constitution if it had allowed that, even though in law that would be a perfectly adequate way of deciding a planning decision. So the underlying reason for the recommendations, which are in the appendices, you'll see a track change version of the planning code of conduct in terms of precisely what's been taken out, and there's also a clean copy version, so you can see how it would look if it's taken through. So the recommendation is for this committee to recommend that to full council, because once again it's a change to the constitution, to update the planning code of conduct in line with Appendix A, I think, or 1.
Thank you. Councillor, you ready? Councillor, you raised a question earlier. Or do you want a bit of time? Any questions that last while?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question
Please.
if I may. So the change of code of conduct will change the policy that the planning department follow?
No. This is the code of conduct for councillors and officers in deciding planning matters, but it doesn't affect planning policy. So yeah.
I have an issue in one of my parishes at the moment where they're simply not following policy. And I I need to spend time reading this, I think, because I need to familiarise myself with it a little bit more. Because if you don't follow policy, it affects everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the planning code of conduct is more about being lobbied as a councillor,
Okay.
or indeed an officer, predetermination of some,
Well, as I'm relatively new to the planning committee, thank you for your answer.
That's reassuring. I contacted the chair of planning before I read the report, and it says here it's been consulted.
Oh yes, so sorry, I didn't.
No, it's fine.
No, sorry, yes. So, yeah, it has been.
Key councillors on planning have been.
That's right, yeah, I ran it by Councillor Davies Lane, who's vice chair, and Councillor Prowse, who's lead member,
Yeah.
all of which approved it.
Yeah, it's reassuring.
I actually went to the barrister's presentation and it was very, very enlightening, I must say. Very,
I was watching some officers' faces to see.
It was very good.
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Just a classification, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. But in terms of, I saw it somewhere that if us as councillors have a declaration of interest in relation to any planning application, we need to report that to yourself. Is that in terms of any conflict at all? The neighbouring, the development, something that actually must be reported?
Yeah, so the idea is that if you, or, I can't remember specifically the wording, I think it's you or your partner submit a planning application or in your line of work, if I mean, so some of our councillors are, architects and, planning agents potentially, so it might actually be in their line of work. So, the idea is to alert us where an application is being submitted.
So for clarification, because I don't think it made, I now obviously understand that's the case, but the way in which the wording was put, I didn't necessarily, I thought that sounded like it applied to any declaration of interest. For example, a development happening next door to your property.
All right.
Clarify.
So if you're in a committee, then and someone's put a planning application in next door to you, then yes, you might well have an interest. So, but that's slightly different from so you may need to exclude yourself from that particular meeting. But what we're talking about is I think you're referring to the fact that in the constitution it provides that you need to alert the planning manager.
Yes,
and
you just said a declaration of interest. So let's put it in so I might declare an interest because there is a development happening next door to me.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're referring to, but I'm not sure it necessarily gives clarity to that, is the point I'm pointing out. It just says a declaration of interest. It doesn't say a declaration of an interest in an application. So my understanding is you're saying if I put in an application, or my wife puts in an application, maybe potentially my sister puts in an application, I should declare an interest. We get that. But what you're not saying is if I declare an interest because somebody is going to build 20 houses in the field in front of me, do I need to make you aware of that? I'm just clarifying that isn't clear.
You don't need so no, you wouldn't need to.
That you don't need to. What I'm saying is it doesn't make it very clear.
Oh, okay. We can certainly look into that ahead of it going to the to full council, but
Thank you.
it might be worth reviewing which specific
Fine.
bit that is, but yeah, we can do that afterwards.
Chair, do you want to sort of send an email to?
Yeah, I just think it's very clear. I'm just struggling to find exactly where it is now, but when in the code of conduct, in interest.
Well, a hard copy, there's one at the end of the table.
I'll go through it and clarify it. Okay.
Can we have a move?
I'm happy to move with
Subject to.
Councillor Jones's clarification.
Oh, do you?
I withdraw that because when you read further down, it doesn't get clarity on that spot, but it does get clarity further down. But it specifically relates to an application. So I think that's probably clear.
Okay.
I should have just read further.
Okay, that's fine. I'll have to have that. Okay. Mover, Councillor Russell, seconder, Councillor Howard Booth. Thank you. And all of you, yes, I keep getting on done. All agreement. Thank you. Thank you, yes. I'm on a roll. Right. 13, annual review of committee effectiveness. Am I using the drawing? Okay, that's good. I'll take that one. I'll probably this one.
So members, this is the annual governance review. This follows the questionnaire that was sent out by Kate to all members of governance committee. We historically never really had a great return rate. Positive this time, we had 8 out of 9 responses. So really good coverage across the board. So thank you members for responding. You'll see in the format of the questions, they're presented in pie chart form with either yes or no answers or don't know. And obviously some of the questions did have comments attached as well. In total, there were 47 questions. I'm not going to go through each question.
There was a lot more staff, wasn't there?
There was, yeah. Obviously, I'll just reference some of the points that were picked up. So obviously, a lot of the questions were full yeses, which is good in terms of do you understand the role and purpose of the committee? That's positive. Has the governance committee provided sufficient membership, etc. Again, that's positive, and also it touched on the appointment of our superintendent member, Naomi, in the responses as well, in terms of the additionality to the membership through the year. In terms of a couple of the points I just want to pick out on, Questions 6 and 7 talked about training and skills and experiences. Question 6, in terms of where you provided with appropriate induction training, because obviously it's mandatory that members receive the governance training. We had a training session held in conjunction with Torwich District Council members and training provided by myself, members of Devon Audit Partnership and members of External Audit. For those members that couldn't make that, we also then recorded the session so that members could catch up on that training. So every member should have received that training. Just to provide clarity for that, obviously we did receive one no response, but again, that may just be because the member watched the training rather than actually received the training we had. In terms of members' skills experience, have they been assessed and any training gaps identified? We do run refresher training again after 2 years. So next year, 2025, we'll be running refresher training. We also do forward out any relevant training that's provided by Local Government Association, any CIPA training, any webinars that are relative to governance related matters. We'll make sure they're passported out through Kate and the team. In terms of assessing skills and experiences, we tend not to assess the skills and experiences when members are appointed to committees, because often there are different reasons as to why members are appointed to committees based on sort of political background, numbers of seats, etc. But it is something that crops up every time we do this this session, and obviously it's something that really I want to pick up probably through colleagues of Devon Audit Partnership to see whether there's a way that maybe we might be able to assess any skill gaps potentially that might sit on the committee. So maybe a piece of work in conjunction with members and colleagues with Tony's team to talk about whether there are any skill gaps that members feel are missing and things that we might be able to do then to try and plug those gaps. So that's a piece of work that we'll take following this this questionnaire, and I'll continue that conversation with Tony and the team. Are members attending meetings on a regular basis? 5 responded yes, 2 didn't know, and one no. I think generally we've been core at this time, which has been good. I know in the past we've had a meeting or 2 where we've had to cancel the meeting due to not being core. And obviously we do appreciate the members are busy. There are other meetings and commitments they have. But again, we have been core throughout the whole.
Yeah, so I'd say that I'm the guilty one that put no. But I've looked at other committees and this is one of the far better attendance. So I'll have to withdraw that one, but
I'll colour that one in blue then, Chair.
I'll send an email to my colleagues for the eventually investment, sure.
Well, to remind them to come.
No, just to highlight
D&D's and Corys.
attendance at this committee with others, and this is really good.
Yeah,
And I do 100%.
there are more independents here than there are any other group. I mean,
Yeah.
hmm.
We give you an extra seat. But this is meant to be independent, not party.
I'm only minding, Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Don, sorry.
Question 11 talked about does the authority section 151 officer or deputy attend all meetings? Obviously, yeah, either myself or my deputy aren't present. Everybody answered yes, but there was a comment, so I'm not sure who our section 151 deputy are, so I'm unsure. So obviously, yeah, that obviously did come out in the training in terms of the roles. Obviously, job titles refer to one thing, but obviously just to confirm, obviously I am a section 151 officer, and if I'm not here, then obviously Tony and my deputy would be here. So we always make sure you've got that coverage on the committee. Moving down, anything I wanted to touch on was
15 would be one.
yeah, that was it.
Okay, yeah.
Was around how does the governance committee consider how it integrates with other committees that may have responsibility for risk management. Obviously, risk comes through this committee in terms of the annual governance statement, in terms of the corporate risk registers. Risk is obviously considered at other committees, such as full council when we're approving capital programme projects and business cases coming forwards, through strategy and resources when members are making decisions. Health and safety obviously is considered at a health and safety committee. So I suppose it's something to consider in terms of looking at your work programme moving forwards about how you may want to pick up on elements of those pieces of work that goes through those various streams as to how maybe you want the governance committee to integrate with that work. So obviously they are going through different committees for different purposes, obviously because they have different approval routes. But ultimately, the governance committee is feeding into full council, which obviously members of governance committee are on as well. So it's just how that's integrated in terms of governance.
And access to those reports as well. So
Absolutely, yeah. Question 21 talked about does the governance committee consider the suitability of accounting policies and treatments in terms of accounting estimates, etc. One answered no, one don't know. They only come if there are any significant changes. So obviously the statement of accounts came this evening, and obviously there are accounting policies in there. And I referenced the fact that there were no changes to the accounting policies from the previous year. If there are any major accounting policy changes, then we would bring them to you before the statement of accounts is produced, normally to your March meeting. So the work programme would normally have an item for any changes to accounting policies for you to consider, for us to then prepare the statement of accounts on those basis. So that would come forward in advance of producing the financial statements. And then the second question after that talks about, does governance committee have a mechanism to keep it aware of topical legal and regulatory issues? A couple of people said don't know and one said no. The topical and regulatory issues sometimes come through the external audit reports. So when they talk about their external audit, at the back of their report, they also then put on any national topical sort of issues that are being sort of referenced at the time. So that's obviously where some of those sort of national issues, those bigger issues, will obviously come through to you as members. I think, Chair,
question now or later?
Yeah, just on 21, I know it's been voiced by me some while ago, but I think in 21 changes to accounting treatment, specifically with the comments that were made commending Adam's report and the way that he delivered the negatives with his red text. I think we can all agree that that's pretty spiffing. Could negative figures on the accounts that are given to us be written in red, so we can see that those are negatives quite clearly? There would be a reason that we use brackets and non-brackets. I think it would be better if
We say for accessibility reasons, you shouldn't use red for anything. I just like it from a pedantic body of text in a annual governance statement numbers. I don't think it's appropriate, but
I know it's standard accounting, but we're not accountants.
Yeah, the brackets obviously we show for, like I say, making sure they're around the right way in that sense in terms of the signs for positive and negative figures. Obviously, they're produced in the accounts in black ink, in the sense it is around accessibility as well. If you put them in red, then that sort of does go against our accessibility as well. But I can obviously produce a separate copy for you in red if you'd like a separate copy. But obviously, the one we have to put on the agenda would have to be for accessibility purposes.
Good, thank you.
I think that's pretty much concludes the.
I'll answer everything.
Say it was a really positive assessment. I think the majority of answers were yes. A couple of don't knows, and also obviously a few things for us to do.
33, obviously, Kate is an assistant by the looks of it. Is right, but secretary. You're not a secretary, but you know.
Question 33 talks about secretariat support, and question 34 talks about communicating information at the right time. But there was no comments to back up those.
No, that's.
I suppose I didn't want to comment on those because there wasn't really any narrative around them. But I think again, 7 answering yes gives us comfort that the committee are acting and supported effectively.
And as far as one of the suitability of the chair, I didn't know. I just said I sent an email whether you think I'm suitable or not. Please let me know offline if you think I am or not.
CV that came through.
Yeah, it's CVs for CVs. It's at the end of the day, it's delivering the goods.
I think Chair answer to question 41 was positive. That talked about sort of other strategic issues which governance committees considered in the past, obviously the last 12 months. You've obviously challenged in areas around things like our cyber and IT threats, agency staff in terms of our resource planning, etc. Talking around sort of housing business continuity, and obviously risk management planning processing time. So there's lots of other areas that you've dipped into strategically, which again is positive rather than just concentrating on the core activity. So overall, Chair, I think it's a positive summary. It shows that the committee is working effectively, and so thanks to members for the positive response rate in terms of getting 8 responses. But happy to take any further questions, Chair, if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions anymore? No. How would you?
I think I should have put this on my answer to the questionnaire, but this is the committee I dread most, because
Next to
we have been here sometimes for 3 hours. And I feel it's not a great model for governance, actually, to deal with really important issues in an evening for 3 hours. And by the time you get to the later stages of the agenda, it's really hard to feel you're at the top of your game. And I wondered if we could consider meeting more frequently with less long agendas.
That definitely can be discussed when we look at the peer review of the governance arrangements. Look at that, knowing.
Yeah.
But there's a resource issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of items on the agenda tonight. I think it's part of looking
This is
at
the worst one. This is
the work
the heaviest
program
meeting, this one.
and looking at, like I say, the volume of reports that are coming into your committee that probably can be looked at, smoothing some of those across the work program so they're not so heavy on the June meeting, because June tends to be the heavy one where you've got the accounts and a couple of the more sort of annual governance reports that come. We get the annual auditors reports. So we can, I think it's just looking at some of those other reports, and the reason some of those are coming tonight, such as the review of some of the constitution items, is because we need to make sure they get to the next full council meeting, which is July. Otherwise, we'd be waiting up until September for those constitutional changes.
I think next time, I think some of these introductions have been a bit shorter tonight. Some of them, which has helped.
Yeah.
But I think if the committee members did the same, that's getting shorter, the introductions. Everyone should have read their reports.
I think those who have jobs, unlike
It is
me,
tiring,
must
yeah.
struggle to read 336 pages.
I spend it every day, it's not every day, but I spend a lot of hours.
I mean,
Just
to me, it's quite a long time, and I can't say I looked in detail at every page. I caught John up, but that was a rare triumph. But, you know, I just think I would like you to consider a few more meetings and not this punishing 3-hour session, because it's happened quite a lot. This isn't exceptional.
No, yeah.
May I apologise?
The best meeting we had, I think, was when you spoke to a couple of your colleagues to say, can you speak up a little bit before the meeting? Question back?
Obviously, this is an area I'm very passionate about.
Yes.
I just wanted to say this is a really important committee to be engaged with, and I raised with, I'm so bad at names when I'm
John,
on this.
Mr.
John.
Speak.
I was really concerned with the attendance in this meeting, because there's one person who actually had never attended, I think, at that point. And that's why I was asking specifically, do we do a report about the effectiveness of the audit committee? Because like you really do ask really engaging questions, and it's great. But actually, the fact you perhaps don't feel the value of what you're achieving here, I don't know if there's a piece of work or training that can take place to highlight that to members, or because if people can just not turn up, then what's the point?
Yeah,
I suppose that's my point. Like,
and I guess
there is a lot of
Councillor
people that
Howard, there's
really invest in this process. Because
it's more meetings than probably end customers. As you walk in, they attend a lot of meetings, don't you?
But I don't, what, when you talk about your role, is it your role then to hold people to account if they're not turning up?
It's, yeah,
Okay, and at what point do you go, perhaps this isn't the committee for you, maybe you'd like to be on this one more and we move someone? Again, this is just for my own training and understanding, because like the fact, you know, it is lasting 3 hours, but like audit sent a report with just the key things, like no one's giving over any information.
no,
They're just giving the really important bits we need to know,
Yeah.
but it's still too long. And also, can I just say, I get really anxious when people say, well, could we speed this up?
I know.
Because if you bring someone like me in to add value to something, and you think, well, we make this quick, then I can't attend a meeting like this, because if something comes in my mind and I want to say it, I'm either here to say it, please don't rush me to speak.
Yeah, Councillor Johnson.
With total respect, as always, for fellow English, Councillor Hayward Booth. While I understand what you're saying, having a large parish and attending lots of meetings, one of which went on to half 11 last week, I think a lot of the effort goes into reading those reports in advance and making sure we've got an understanding of them. And I think it's part of it. I wouldn't be against having additional meetings, but fitting them in is often a challenge.
Yeah,
And for many of us attending so many meetings, I don't have a major issue. I do agree that it's a lot of information that does drag on, and maybe as we get nearer to the end of the meeting, the level of tension might drop a little bit. I still think that we go through the process effectively, and I personally don't have any concerns with that.
I beg to differ.
I will have a regular meetings with the officers here. We'll look at this. Is there any way we can?
I mean, we historically had one more meeting than we have now, so a few years ago,
Yes,
we've got
it
one
was
meeting,
six.
so
Yes.
we have dropped that. So again, we can have a look at that. We'll have to look at the committee timetable, the volume of information coming forward. Obviously, I suppose it comes down to that value that the governance committee provide, whereas years ago, we probably had less reports. But then you are asking to look into other areas that maybe governance committees didn't look at in the past. So that balance, again, it's important because obviously that challenge is welcomed. Your standby is going to,
I think Devon, our audit partner, sent me a report of what's discussed at other councils, which made me think about things we can do. So I'm partly to blame. Councillor Bushell.
how is it this?
I do certainly think that there are things that we could delve into deeper.
I think it's just TV.
I think it was far more frustrating during the last term where you drive into a meeting to find that there wasn't a balance or a representative.
I did hear about that, yes.
That's far more frustrating than coming here and doing the work. I do understand that Councillor Jones represents a number of different parishes, whereas I just have one ward.
Okay. Right.
We do have a similar level of casework, I'm sure, though, because there is a reason, there's a number of electorate per seat. So I take on board what Councillor Jones is saying. He and I both work during the day and have a lot of other commitments outside because we try and involve ourselves with the communities more than necessarily the council. But I find it equally frustrating that there are times, not necessarily just in this committee, where things are hurried forwards and it's not comfortable. I know that John is a great advocate for hearing each question, and I thank him in meetings when he has perhaps put his head above the parapet to say, no, we can't just rush through a meeting. If there are relevant questions, we need to have them asked.
As chair, I've done that. I'm trying to balance it. So
I wasn't talking about this particular.
No. We'll try and cut out the joking bits, not say a few minutes here and there. But there's something we need that, don't we? Can I leave it with me? I'll discuss it with the officers to see what we can do. No,
Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for your comments. That's just a note. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. True.
Thank you.
Right, moving slowly on. Exemptions. I'll help you read this one. Oh, sorry.
On that point of doing things in detail, I don't know if it's possible, but I've gone back and read the point that I raised earlier, which was on item 12. I don't know if we can go back to that. It was page 250, page 257, point 2.2. It just isn't clear. I think can I just ask that it is just given.
Well, we can read it, but if you pass an email through, if it's a minor amendment, I'm sure it can be.
Yeah, I can certainly look into. I think the purpose of 2.2 is to just So I could look again, and it isn't. So I suppose really that's aimed at people that are councillors that are going to make a planning decision rather than all the councillors that aren't necessarily on planning committee. So I mean, if a councillor knows that they're going to have potential interest in a planning decision, and they're going to become, I mean, having said it's only for those that are going to make the decision, I suppose if you're going to come and talk at planning committee, it's still relevant. But yeah, I mean, it is primarily aimed at those attending planning committee to alert me early on.
So just for clarity for councillors, so it's clear, if somebody wants to build 20 houses in the field next to me, I don't need to inform you about that interest if I'm merely a councillor of the ward.
No, yeah, so that probably wouldn't be necessary. It's more for I mean, but if you were on planning committee, then certainly yes.
That's what I think.
Just thinking a bit more clarity. Yeah.
Councillor Bushell, is it the same item?
I think that's the difference, because I was going to say that I always thought that if you were going to speak about something which, as in Councillor Jones's idea, that developing a field in front of his house could easily be said to either increase or decrease the value of his property, that he would have what was an old school pecuniary interest in that. And therefore, if he's speaking on that, he should say, at the very least, that my house is contiguous to this, or there may be an increase or decrease in the value of my property due to this application, which would give just complete transparency, which is better for the council, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it is worth being transparent, but I just think the point of 2.2 is more around those involved with the decisions around planning to alert early on, because, you know, if you're coming in to speak about it, ultimately, you know, you're not going to, you know, make the decision.
Right, thank you. Right, moving on to 14. I'm sure you're presenting this one.
Yeah, 16. Oh,
Right.
Sorry, yeah, so, thank you again, Jim. So this is only come because, under the contract procedure rules, at 4.3 of the contract procedure rules, where, an exception is made from the contract procedure rules in terms of, relating to the selection, award and entry into contracts by council, S&R committee, or the chief executive under the, under urgent powers, then under 4.4, it's for me to make arrangements for the item to be placed for governance committee, for that committee to note the detail of the exception and the reasons for it. So what happened was that a report went to Strategy and Resources relating to 361 Energy CIC, and the key part of this was that the contract procedure rules were set aside to allow a direct award to that company, and that's the reason it's been brought here to noting in case you had any questions on it, really. I think the primary reason that it was taken to the Strategy and Resources Committee was in relation to carrying on with that program, rather than necessarily it needing to be around, you know, setting aside procurement requirements. But nonetheless, those requirements were set aside. Hence, it triggers that requirement in the Constitution for it to be brought here.
Thank you. Any questions? Just note this. Yeah, not seeing any hands. Thank you. Thank you much. 15. Head of.
Yeah,
John Archer.
Yeah, copy now, Chair. So members, this is your normal audit recommendation tracker. This tracks the audit recommendations that have previously come through the internal audit reports. The appendices are in front of you. Appendix B sets out those audits that have been completed since the last committee. Pleased to report that there are 37 audit recommendations that have been completed since the last report to you back in March. So quite a significant number of closures of audit recommendations, which is really positive. Appendix D sets out the overdue actions. Pleased to report there are no overdue actions. Appendix C does set out some actions where we are asking for extensions of dates. There are 11 actions on Appendix C, which sounds a lot. 11 actions, of those, 10 of those actually are for date requests in the next 6 months. So short-term date extensions, just to see some of those actions over the line. Of those 11, 6 of them are over 75% complete. So it's really just the final pieces of the implementation of those actions that we're asking for. What we have added onto the appendix this time is also the number of times that date extensions have been requested. So that was picked up at the last meeting in terms of, is this the first request? Is it the second request? So of the 11, 5 of them coming forwards are first time requests, 4 of them are second requests, and there are a couple on there that obviously are slightly longer ones where we have actually asked for date request extensions a couple of times. The one that is asking for a 4th request is the second one, which is around our business continuity procedures. That is 90% complete, but there's one further piece of work required to apply a checklist retrospectively to 2 cloud-based applications we have to support the top 5 critical functions. So it's a piece of work that is already underway. You'll see on the second page, the request to date extension is actually the end of this month. So it's literally a couple of weeks just to see that final piece of the jigsaw completed, but it wasn't done in time prior to this committee enabled us to close it off. Otherwise it would be on the closure appendix. So numbers, there are obviously a number of date extensions there, but of them, obviously, of the 11, 10 of them are for date extensions between now and December. 7 of them are actually up until September, so they're only short-term extensions. But I'm happy to take any questions from members.
I know in the past we, if we can, excuse possible, and I know you're trying.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yes, I'm disheartened, especially to hear that there are some that have repeatedly and possibly excessively or excessive in number requests for extensions, and I'd like it noted that this committee would encourage, is that, sorry, I'm looking to the monitoring officer, encourages that as strongly as I can put my views towards repeated extensions over a number of years, especially in areas where we have been told that previous extensions were of a manageable timeline and therefore additionals would not be needed. I just, you understand my feeling here, that if we're given assurances that yes, it's a realistic time span, and then we get another and then another, it's a bit disappointing.
Can I propose that we note your concern?
I think the whole committee sees that, and if an officer does give us reassurances that yes, this can be completed within a certain amount of time, we wouldn't expect to have another 2 time extensions. Regardless, I do understand there are extenuating circumstances, but it's not a good precedent, in my opinion, to stand by and just nod these through if those are the cases.
Can we just note that you voted that? Can I have
I think, Jeff, I just add some context and just come back. Obviously, I totally agree. Obviously, I'm disappointed that we've got 11.
Yeah, I'm sure
forward. I'd rather come here and sit in front of you and say that everything's on track, that things do come up. Obviously, the teams are being more realistic now when the internal audit reports come forward, so around making sure dates are realistic for implementation, because it's very keen sometimes when you get into an audit report. Okay, we've had a couple of recommendations. Let's try and please the auditors and say, well, actually, we'll do them in the next 6 months. Then they realise then there's another audit report comes next month and they do exactly the same again. All of a sudden, then the next 6 months goes relatively quickly. So the teams are trying to be as realistic as they can. They are extremely under pressure in some service areas, and they are managing some things that all of a sudden become a higher priority. So if it's an audit within housing, and then all of a sudden there's a sudden increase in temporary accommodation placements, that judgment around, well, where do we spend our time? Do we spend our time making sure those placements are dealt with, or do we make sure that the procedure note that's recommended in the internal audit is dealt with? Obviously, each have a priority level, and it's important that we try and satisfy both, but we do try to achieve them. I think the positive is that the date extension requests are only short term. We are significantly way through a number of those recommendations. As you can see, a number of them are over 75%. And the teams are getting better at being more realistic. Some of these audits were back in 2020 and 2021, when maybe the teams weren't as realistic with some of those date settings. So they are getting better, and hopefully will improve for next time round. And I hope that we've got less than 11 when we come to the next year. That's for sure.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and John knows how much I respect him. I feel that the reasoning that he's used around teams being more realistic about the expectations is something that was well in place and used during my past term of office. Therefore, I think that would be at least 2 years. So really, I don't see that as a reasoning as to why, we're still getting this repeated thing, and I'd like to leave it at that.
Yeah, it's been though, I mean, under
But
item
it's
two,
been years that
Yeah.
we've been saying we need realistics, and we're still getting occasional repeats, and
I'm sure it's getting kicked up in their
I'd
personal
like
plans
to
reviews,
see,
performance reviews.
yes.
Yeah, we pick it up with the officers, and as I say, it's not just about the realistic date setting in terms of agreeing audit recommendation. It is about those other pieces of work that those teams
Which
are.
conflicts, sometimes it's conflicting.
So you can see there's a number of pieces of work in here around.
Okay.
There's a number of pieces of work in here around asset management plan,
I know.
the property area. The same team that's dealing with those recommendations are the same teams that were asking for some of these big capital projects to deliver things like future high streets funds. So other things come forwards that take precedence over maybe where we've previously set audit recommendations. It is just that balance. But we do challenge, as heads of service, they challenge individual officers around some of these recommendations as part of their sort of appraisal targets. So we'll take those comments on board, we'll take it back to the teams, and we'll keep delivering and trying to get those achieved within these agreed dates, if you're happy to approve them, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Jones. Oh, no.
Could I just on that and say, well, it may be that for a repeated request of an extension, it might be seen appropriate by the chair to invite that head of service to come and address this committee to explain exactly the intricacies, and that may be a deterrent.
But it's what we've been doing the last few months, which conflicts with how we've moved to, but reassure, Councillor. I'm blank, it's late. That's what happened, is we've been bringing in these people, one part what they're doing, which I think is useful, and we'll continue to do that to reassure you on that. Councillor, thank you very much.
I just want to come on a little bit strong, and I just want to echo, reading through the excuses and the detail of this report.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to those that are working on this, and as far as I can see it, there's obviously challenges to resource and things dependent on other things, and I'm reassured on why some of these things delayed, and have confidence the team will bring forward those reports when they're in a position to do so. Thank you.
And our auditor will be keeping on it.
Yes, I mean, we do, so just on that, we do, obviously, when we do, follow on audits, we do go back to recommendations and assess if they've been implemented or not, so we do that. I mean, in all of this, I just think, what is the risk that is being tolerated by not implementing the recommendations which have been agreed by management?
Thank you. I'm just noticing that one, I think.
You're approving the recommendation.
Yes, can I have a mover for the acceptance, please? Councillor Jones, is a seconder. Councillor Walker, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Right, work.
You don't quite see all the council pushing voting on.
Yes, yeah, that's what it's.
I also thank Councillor Jones for bringing balance to the debate.
Thank you. 16 work programme.
Just a moment, Chair.
There's notes. Yeah, thank you.
It's one extra item someone wanted me to add. It was just a note to add on community risk register to September.
It was, Alex and Miles, or emergency plan officer, would like to attend again, based on the work programme, just to give an update. That's a sort of central government risk
Right,
register.
okay, yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes. And if we're still at 90%, hopefully be 100% for the actions on business continuity, right then.
We hope so.
Right, there's nothing. Risk register,
Yeah, again, Chair, this
part A still.
this is the part A, yeah, just summary of our corporate risk to note and our discussion in part B.
So those that weren't here the past time, we're discussing more detail in part B. So for the public can see on high level risk in the part A. Right. Yeah, any questions? Part A? No, okay.
Sold.
Those, yeah, part B, please, no, those are part B on the secondary. Second, councillor Quinn, secondary, thank you. Right. I thought we didn't have to, and develop, please. Yeah. All in favour?
Thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm just
thank you.
going to stop the recording now for the meeting. I don't think there's anyone present anyway, so.
Seems to be one on there, but just.
So we go.
Okay.